Okay, hello everyone. There's Tara. The end of an era here at Swing State Studios.
End of an era.
The end of an era. It was the AI charrette, and you did
Yeah.
a lot with health. You did a lot with health. But now we're going to be moving on to Lansing and the western part of Michigan. But
Yes.
you guys did a great job. It was a week here.
Yep. And I've been here for a week. It's been beautiful. The weather's been awesome, and there's a lot of Trump spirit in the air. And I feel like
Trump everywhere, right?
Trump everywhere. And the studio is ready for some creative stuff. George has it on lockdown, and we're ready to fight. Okay, so we're ready to. What do you think, George? We're ready to fight. We're ready to root it down, and when we get rooted, we get creative.
Right, and
Yeah.
I think everybody's expecting some kind of shenanigans, some kind of fast action.
Yeah.
TCF Center, man, last time with Mark Elias
Yep.
down there at the.
There's-
Hillary's in town tonight.
Hillary's in town
Hillary's in
tonight.
town tonight.
Okay, now that is scary because not only is she a terrifying person, but
Witch,
she's the witch of the season. But we need to,
Overcome.
Yeah,
We need to keep our senses. We need to be smart. Get out to vote.
Mm-hmm.
Vote today
Definitely
or vote early, and then
I-
get people out on election day to vote.
Yeah, I think President Trump said to vote early, so I
think it's
feel
okay.
like that is a good thing to do,
Yeah.
just in case.
Elon's given $1 million if you vote early. So
See?
what are you going to do with your million? What are you and Dave going to do? Probably build a deck.
Maybe we could have like a large cat research center where you can
You'll do something with
you
the
can
million.
research with the cats
Okay. See, it's
and
always
the cat ladies.
yeah, the cat ladies.
Yeah.
But see, these are the grandmothers that we bring from all over America. They're coming from blue states where they're not probably going to move the needle.
Yeah.
They're coming to Michigan, and you moved the needle here. Thank
Yeah,
you for
yeah.
all that you did with neighborhood health.
Okay.
And we're going to keep doing it. Carol McIntosh.
Carol.
And then Amber, when she's done running
Yep.
and changing in Atlanta, maybe
That's
she
right.
wins in Atlanta, probably.
All right.
And then she probably won't be on neighborhood health and protect the nest.
Well, the good thing about Amber is that there's always a thread to reach her.
Yeah.
So even if we're broadcasting something that she shared with us, we'll make sure it comes on down the line.
Great. Awesome. And I want to do some more lead-ins for the neighborhood health this time around. There she is, the great Tara Star. Give us a little bit of, Summerfield.
Okay, George walks on Summerfield. It makes him feel fine. And it's going with
Jasmine down my mind. You sing it so much better. There it is, ladies and gentlemen.
All right.
Summerfield, right out there.
Go out and vote. Trump 2024 and everyone else who, is not this freaking 2030 or whatever this other crap is. Okay?
Yeah, that's
Pay
crazy.
attention, especially pay attention to school boards. I don't know. Mine's not doing school board this time, but pay attention.
As a grandmother, she's talking about her grandkid. Okay,
Yep.
thanks everybody.
And all the kids.
Well, there's the great Tara Star, everybody. And I get to be the guy who introduces the inaugural show. And Aaron, I think we might bring your mic down a little bit because I can hear a little bit of feedback.
Okay.
But now you bring your sound down. Here in Michigan, and I'm on with Carol McIntosh in this initial inaugural neighborhood health, which is also known as AKA. Maybe turn your your sound is high. Or maybe it's my sound that's high. But anyway, Carol just left here. She was here helping all week for the charrette. And I want to welcome Protecting the Nest is the other name, AKA Protecting the Nest, the great Carol McIntosh out there in Portland, Oregon. How are you today, Carol?
Well, I'm good, George, and it's nice to be here again. Even though we don't have our trio quite yet, but we're working on it, and there's a lot of protecting that needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of like, if you put Amber together with Tara, maybe that's like my weight. So it's probably works out. And we got Tara out of here with a new battery. So we got her back to Dave.
Oh, great.
So she's okay. And really wanted to jump into, we talked about so much when you were here, and we didn't really do any shows while you were here, but we did a lot of background research. You've obviously done just some tremendous stuff with the anti-cancer stuff, the orthomolecular stuff. You've done all this great stuff with the chaga mushroom stuff. So really, we can kind of dive in anywhere you want to. Late breaking news, though, out of nowhere, Bob Malone, just an hour ago, is lashing out at me, right? Right. What? He's trying to get a cabinet position with Trump because they think Trump's going to win. He's going to this Brownstone event in this weekend in Pittsburgh. And all of a sudden he picks me to lash out at before this event. So it's just kind of crazy, with him getting all the 9 billion and all the stuff he was doing with directed evolution down in Alachua, Florida, and all that stuff. And then he comes out at me. But anyway.
Well, that's because you're pointing out what his history is.
Yeah,
He
Stanley.
doesn't want anyone to know.
Yeah, Stanley Plotkin and Inovio and mRNA for 2 decades. If that's your hero, fine. But Carol, you've done so many great things. We talked about let's start with the orthomolecular study with ivermectin. Is that okay?
Sure. Yeah, I know more about Fenbin than ivermectin, but yeah.
Well, it's both. It's both
Yeah.
in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a combination therapy with Fenbin and ivermectin, and along with the vitamin C therapy. We knew our good friend up in Washington, Cliff High, was talking about the high vitamin D, high vitamin C, the zinc, and so forth. We knew he had like half the protocol right off the bat, and it turned out
he actually died from colon cancer. He flatlined, and he came back. I
was going to say, I hope Cliff didn't die.
No, this was I think in 2018 or something. It was a bunch of years ago, and then he came back and he restored himself using his Fenbin protocol. That's the first I'd ever heard of it.
Yeah, I knew Cliff before that, so I was just hoping I hadn't heard anything. But this is the orthomolecular study that Aaron's bringing up on the graphics. But do you want to go a little bit into the protocol? And we have a friend, John O'Loughlin, who's on this protocol or something close to this protocol, who was on the edge too with the prostate cancer, and now has made kind of a comeback from the prostate cancer. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, well, the protocol that he ended up on is called the Joe Tippins protocol, and it works with taking 1 gram, I guess, of Fenbin, it's 222 micrograms of active Fenbin, and his is the source. It's a Merck product that is made for horses, dogs, or something else. I forget what the third one is, but it comes in
probably some other farm animal, right?
Yeah, some other farm animal.
Yeah.
Okay. Dogs is the one for sure. Anyway, and so this is made in Austria or Switzerland or somewhere under really good protocol for purity and everything. So that's why he recommends this version. I had a different version that's supposed to be formulated for people, but when he Joe Tippins double-checked both of them, he found that the one that is made by Fenbin Labs had some contaminants, and it's manufactured in China. So he went with the animal version. Cliff High used the Chinese version, and he restored himself and is strong and healthy right now after he apparently had breast cancer years ago, and then that came back as fourth stage colon cancer, and he's 6 something or other, and he got down to just a little bit over 100 pounds or 120 or something. He lost a huge amount of weight, and and flatlined. So he used the Fenben. I don't know if he was using the Fenben before he died or if that's what he came up with afterwards. I can't remember because it was a while ago. He went through it all. But he used it with a sulfurated protein, and that's how Joe Tippins also recommends it too. You take the powder and mix it in with yogurt or cottage cheese or there are any number of things. Actually, I think Joe Tippins said any kind of oil works. He said put it in avocados or all sorts of stuff. It didn't have to be the sulfurated protein. But that's what Joe Tippins had said. And Joe Tippins also uses it with a few other herbal products. One is,
Is Joe Tippins the guy I'm thinking about that does the mushrooms, or am I wrong?
No,
on that?
that's a different guy. Joe Tippins is actually he's a finance guy. He finances startup companies, and he's in Oklahoma. And the guy,
So
the mushroom
he just
guy
kind of
was-
happened onto the protocol.
Well, he
and
happened onto it because he was diagnosed with 4-stage cancer, and and a friend of his was a veterinarian, and the veterinarian said, "This is looking great for animals. If I were you, you've been told to go home and die, just like they told John to go home and die." He said, "I'd take this stuff because it's really curing all kinds of cancer in animals, and people are really starting to look at it." So he thought, "What do I have to lose?"
We
And
probably should throw in a disclaimer here that Neighborhood
Yeah.
News is not a hospital. We're not doctors. This is for entertainment purposes only and sharing anecdotal information. Consult your doctor and oncologist, blah, blah, blah. Okay, go ahead, Carol.
Right. Well, anyway, there's 3 and maybe there's more now because he keeps evolving this over his website, and it includes turmeric or curcumin, which is the active ingredient, and it's a refined version of it, and quercetin and something else I can't remember. Anyway, that's part of his protocol that John used. And John was told to go home with 4-stage prostate cancer. He said, "Go home and die. There's nothing else we can do for you." And John had taken the hormones, and I don't think he did radiation, but he might have done chemo.
I know he did chemo. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he did that right before 2020. He was working on that. I remember he wasn't feeling so great.
Yeah, it had been in remission for a long time. It had
Mm-hmm.
been in remission like 8 or 10 years, and then had come back with a vengeance out of nowhere. And it wasn't because of the shot, because he didn't take the shot, I don't believe.
No, but what his urologist told him was that that's what happens. You get a remission for 5 years or whatever, and then your PSA shoots up. And his went on 200 or 300. It went way, way high. And then they just said, "Well, we've run the course. Say goodbye," And so he put it out on his show. "Well, send me your ideas. I'm willing to try whatever." And a lot of people mentioned the Femben. We sent him some. I think Kathy sent him one of the kinds that Cliff High had mentioned, and I sent him some links, including to the Joe Tippins protocol. I think Carmadoc had also heard about it, and who was his other friend, the cat guy? They'd both heard about Fenben as well. So he had a lot of advice to go ahead and try it. And he had Marcia, his wife, dig into it. She was in charge of research. So she looked up, all the information everyone had given her and came up with a plant-based diet. I'm not sure he does the vitamin E anymore. Anyway, here's Joe Tippins. You got Joe Tippins. Okay.
Well, and I would encourage anybody who's going through this therapy to have a wife like John has, Marcia, because she really, keeps him to the protocol, I'm sure. And she's a lovely, lovely woman, and a very health conscious woman. And I know her well, and I know John well. And it just makes me feel so good because, I've had so many friends, and I'm sure you too, Carol, have died of cancer.
Well, I
And
have more and more friends now that are willing to try Fenben, and it's helping. I have 4 or 5 people that have improved their
that's
cancer
great. That's great
situation.
news.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not just one.
Yeah. I see Screaming Ospreys there. That's John's channel, I believe, screamingospreys.com. I'm not
Mhm.
sure what the URL is, but John has screamingospreys.com, I think, is the thing. And there's John's schedule for his channel, which is the McDuff channel. And John is on Rumble, but he also has I think he's back on YouTube for here and there really quick.
Well, I think he produces it on YouTube, and then he quick transfers it over to Rumble. I think that's what Mark does too. A lot of people do that have gotten there. They still have a little vestige of a YouTube channel, but they don't want to risk anything.
Yeah, John's dad died of, well, we don't know exactly what, but died very young and was involved.
Well, John thinks it did have to do with the SV40 and fast-acting cancer poisoning. Well, he thinks his cancer had to do with SV40, but his dad was, they used the protocol that they had perfected for Castro to kill Castro on his dad, along with some LSD, I believe.
Well, I think if you follow that book, Aaron put it up. If you want to go back later, McDuff Lives. He talks about his dad working for John F. Kennedy during the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the early 60s. And then before that, J. Edgar Hoover. And before that, with MacArthur in the Second World War on the USS Nashville. So it's a very interesting story, but here's a guy who's kind of this hero, and he has this health alteration committee that kind of comes in, and this guy named Richard Bissell with the CIA, and all of a sudden he gets sick at these really important inflection points in U.S. history. We'll talk about John in a little bit here in a minute and a show he did today, but all of these folks that we are talking about, we've known for years, right? And Carol knows him well. I know him well. I did a lot of shows with John. So these are all not things that we're just pulling off a website or something like that. These are people we know really well.
Yeah. So. And John did a whole series on his recovery from cancer. And he recently, after a year of going to his prostate doctor and getting all his levels tested, he was finally said, well, do I need to come anymore, doctor? And the doctor said, I see no evidence of any cancer whatsoever, and I don't think there's any reason for you to have to come. And that was his celebration, and that was just a little while ago.
Wow, that's fantastic news.
Yeah.
You mentioned to me earlier, Carol, that you watched John's show today with A.W. Finnegan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe if you wouldn't mind, because I really just think the world of A.W. Finnegan, if you wouldn't mind, if we just jump into the A.W. Finnegan episode that John did today.
I thought that was a fabulous show. It was really wonderful. And
we'll play a little bit of it so you get to know A.W. Finnegan, but he's used 4 different intelligence agencies. He worked for John Loftus, who had a top secret clearance for a long time. And he's compiled what may be the root cause to a lot of these quick cancers or fast cancers through this thing called the super antigen. I'll let A.W. Finnegan, who's wrote the book called The Sleeper Agent, I'll let him take it from there with John O'Loughlin here.
That we can skip over. I asked about Eric, or I told it about Eric Traub, and I said, it suppressed the mouse's immune system and reactivated a latent virus from the inside. Does this not show that a vaccine can start new epidemics by reactivating latent viruses, even if the vaccine is not a live virus vaccine? Because I was saying, so in 1936, German virologist Eric Traub discovered a condition later coined immune tolerance due to his work with the virus of LCM virus, or the lymphocytic choriomeningitis virus, which he started by injecting foreign proteins into the brains of mice, causing an epidemic. It reactivated latent LCM virus and spread to all the other mice. It was supposed to be vaccine research, and the injection simulated a vaccine. it suppressed the mouse's immune system and reactivated a latent virus from the inside. Does this not show that a vaccine can start new epidemics by reactivating latent viruses, even if the vaccine is not a live virus vaccine? And it basically said, in sum, Traub's findings on immune tolerance were foundational for understanding immune tolerance. It said, however, modern day vaccine safety protocols are designed to avoid these issues. It's a reminder of why vaccine development is so rigorous to account for the complexities of immune responses and prevent any risk of reactivating latent viruses. But later on, I point out to it that it's wrong about that, and it acknowledges that, yes, I was wrong.
Yeah,
And
let's take our time and go through it,
Yeah.
because the way that you got there is also interesting. So the answer to the question begins, the discovery of immune tolerance through Eric Traub's work with lymphocytic choriomeningitis virus in 1936 indeed demonstrated that introducing foreign proteins or certain immune stimuli could have unexpected effects on immune function, potentially reactivating latent viruses. I mean, people should know that. This is like every medical school, everybody that's treating chronic disease and anything else should know this, because this is 1936, and here's you're confirmed as far as the geniuses of the internet that conspire to create Chat GPT. I mean, it's here.
Well, there you have it. That's just there's A.W. Finnegan. You heard him speaking, and he has Lyme disease and some kind of neurotropic effects. That's what he had says. So there's a little tiny slur to his speech, but don't let that fool you. He's really the guy's a genius in terms of his research and his dogged dedication to this subject. And Carol, I thought it was interesting that you and I both watched this show independently because we found it so interesting. Yeah, this morning. And we didn't have to brief each other or get each other up to speed on this. We both, were glued to our televisions, or our devices, because we're like, A.W. Finnegan is talking and John's interviewing him. And the thing I thought was very interesting about this is they're taking a tool, which is ChatGPT, which comes from the OpenAI consortium, but the language models have been tweaked or twisted to be woke. They've tried to say everybody's a conspiracy theorist if you challenge vaccines or anything. And even the thing that's been twisted and tweaked to be woke is confirming A.W. Finnegan's work.
Yeah, it confirmed everything he said. And we both read his book too. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
George, I think we know what it says. I got my copy right here, The Sleeper Agent. And
the best book you could ever buy about as far as vaccines and health, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And he read 700 pages or 700 papers that Eric Traub wrote. And he said that wasn't all the papers. It's just all he could get his hands on. They were all in German. He had to translate every single one to understand what this mechanism was that affected his mother and his health. And he is the expert. It's really amazing. But Eric Traub studied ticks. He studied blood insects. He studied bird migration for how these ticks can spread. He studied so many things, and it was all based on bioweapons, how to not kill a population, but weaken them over time so they don't know what's happening. And so it can't be diagnosed by their procedures that they've learned in medical school. This was all done intentionally.
Now, Eric Traub was a Nazi doctor, and he rose through the ranks when Hitler came to power, and he goes all the way through the Third Reich. And then he, instead of being hung at Nuremberg with all the other war criminals, quite the opposite happened. He's secreted by the CIA to a place called Plum Island in the northeast of the United States, in the Long Island Sound area. And then he continues his work on all these ticks, and he's combining 2 and 3 different things from the Rocky Mountain Lab out in Montana. They're bringing in rickets. It's where they're bringing in Lyme disease. They're bringing in all these neurotropic Rocky Mountain spotted fever, Lassa fever, West Nile fever, everything. And then they're combining it in this witch's brew. And then they're trying to make it so that mosquitoes and other fleas, ticks, etc., that are carried by animals, they're using it in an aerial bombardment campaign. So the idea is we'll release this over Korea, we'll release it over Vietnam, it'll fall down, it'll go on the animals, and then the animals will get it in their blood supply, in the food chain, and then will affect the people that way. This Operation Mongoose, if you remember, in Cuba also is looked at, not just Vietnam, not just Korea. So this is something that still could be having effects. And they tested it in Central Florida, not far from Alachua, where, Bob Malone, Mr. Directed Evolution is. So this really could have far-flung effects for many different inflammation diseases, many different types of infectious diseases, neurotropic diseases, the muscular sclerosis, and some of the neuralgias and neuropathies. He's really onto something here, I think, A.W. Finnegan. Your thoughts, Carol?
Yeah, well, he's onto a lot of stuff. There's a little bit more to his history, too, that I remember. He started out in London, and then he came back to Germany and was introduced to one of the American virologists that worked for Rockefeller. And that guy brought him into Rockefeller's lab in New York, I guess, wherever it was. And he was there pre-World War II for quite a while. And then he brought his fiancée, married her, came back, and she was a Nazi. So they were part of that whole Nazi, pre-Nazi time in America, where there were summer camps and rallies in New York City and all that. They were actively part of that. Then he decided when the war broke out, he had to go back to be a Nazi, and he continued his virology and study. He was the bioweapon expert for Nazi Germany. And then when the occupation came and they lost the war, his lab in Insel Reims became occupied by Russia. So then he worked with Chumakov, who was the head Russian bioweapon guy from World War II. They worked together. And then, who was it? A British guy who was part of the Cambridge Five, McLean, I think was his name.
Don McLean. Yeah,
Don
there he
McLean brought him back to the Rockefeller lab and put him in Plum Island at that point. And he, at that point, hadn't been arrested as being a Russian spy, part of MI6, but that happened later. So not only was he a Nazi agent, he was a Russian agent and a British agent all at once.
Yeah, and if you look at, like you mentioned, he was at the Rockefeller Institute, and he was sent from the United States doing the bioweapons research, and he was sent and then placed and installed into the Nazi regime. It's almost like all the testing and so forth against the Jews in the death camps was more of a bioagent and bioweapons experimenting program, at least in the early days, and the incinerators, et cetera, and all the horrific things that we know and typically associate with the death camps were more for biocontainment. And then toward the end of the war, they flexed toward more just annihilation. But there was massive experimentation. I think this is the part everybody misses in history, that the death camps could have been for the purpose of Rockefeller bioexperimentation primarily. And then the final solution really kind of developed out of that at the end with what do we do with all these people now that we're losing the war? What do we do? Well, let's hide the evidence. Let's, mass exterminate all these people. But the records of all these people's blood and their various separation of blood with white blood and the red blood and various medical records all were secreted away, right, with this Nazi paperclip program, and then brought back to the United States by the CIA. So, and we very much still could be living this out. We might still be living these experiments out with mRNA. Again, we're not doctors. We're not trying to say bad things about the experimental mRNA shot, but it does seem, again, like mass experimentation.
Yeah, well, the end of his career really plays into that, because they kept trying to elevate him when he was in the U.S. after he'd been brought in by McLean. He was at Plum Island. They wanted him to become the head bioweapons guy in the U.S., but there was such a Nazi past, they couldn't ever pass him through the gauntlet. And finally, they had to admit, okay, he should be expelled. When everybody was, all the Nazis were being found out, he was expelled. And so what happens? He becomes a consultant to the vaccine industry, and he is able to come and go from Germany back to the US, consulting for Pfizer, consulting for all the vaccine pharmaceutical guys, and presenting his ideas. So I think there's a real good chance that he is, very involved in the protocols that we ended up with here.
Well, this is a fascinating discussion, because I followed Charles Rixey. I think Charles Rixey has a new documentary that just came out. Charles Rixey is not necessarily a doctor, not necessarily a virologist, but Charles Rixey is one of the few people who've honed in on the actual work that was being done at Fort Detrick by a guy named William Patrick III, who was an understudy or a protege of Eric Traub, who was talking about putting a sleeper agent. This is something that, as Carol said, is under the radar, just enough under the radar to cause the inflammatory effects, but not be diagnosed, right? And it's called a super antigen. An antigen is something that raises a response in the immune system. A super antigen raises a massive sort of cytokine storm in the immune system. And so this is the same thing. Cytokine storm is the same thing that we see in SARS 2002, 2003, in MERS in 2008, 2009, and in coronavirus for the 5 iterations of coronavirus. So Charles Rixey, in his new documentary, talks about this. This is the super antigen picture here, which is talks about the effects, neurological, immunological, and cardiovascular effects. We still could be living out these Traub experiments. That's the big idea here. We still could be living.
Well, I think besides the super antigen, it also, the sleeper agent is when the immune system is overwhelmed by so many antigens floating around that it stops being able to see them. And that's really how AIDS works. Your body stops being able to see it. So then all these things, all of a sudden, later on, after the latency time, then they just start activating as chronic illnesses, all different kinds of chronic illnesses. So that's the sleeper agent idea. And that's what we're seeing. People did die right after they got the shot in ridiculously high numbers, but it's still not as much as a year or two later, when we're getting all this fast acting cancer and all these neurological effects and other things that aren't necessarily associated with the jab, because they don't happen for a few years later. So that latency is the kind of things we're seeing now in the statistics and in the death rates. And they're saying, well, we don't know how this happened, but well, maybe we do. And his wonderful conversation with ChatGPT really goes through the details of how that happened. And ChatGPT comes to agree with him completely.
Well, let's talk about that activation idea. Let's talk about the activation. Because somebody has placed a latent virus in your genome. Somebody's placed some kind of latent thing, like you mentioned HIV. You mentioned, the herpes virus comes to mind, the SV40, shingles, all these other things come to mind. And then all of a sudden, everything's a quiescence. There's kind of a placidness amongst the immune system. Then inject the super antigen, and then you get this reactivation, an unpredictable sometimes reactivation, and that's the thing that I think. This is where I say he has sort of A.W. Finnegan maybe onto the Occam's razor here, the simplest explanation of all of these flare-ups we're having of cancers, the myocarditis. I had a little bit of that with the pericarditis. We have the people with all the inflammations. You're seeing these knee replacements and these shoulder, hip replacements, etc. With all the cancers are shooting up off the roof. So maybe A.W. Finnegan, by zeroing in on the causal factor across the board, it's sort of like the Occam's razor explanation of what could be this thing that's causing this across the board flare up. And what are your thoughts there?
Well, it sure looks to me, after reviewing his book, reading it a couple times, listening to the ChatGPT response, it seems like it was intentionally meant to do that.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned ChatGPT. Of course, that's started by a consortium of people, of academics who wanted to put the source code of artificial intelligence out there in an open foundation. Sam Altman of the current OpenAI is in there. Elon Musk put some money into it. It was supposed to be this language model that we all could see what was going on, the inner workings, sort of like Linux is for the computing world. And what was supposed to come out of that was this, something that would be sort of a mix of experts, or MOE, they call it. So you sort of like you would get together if you had like the Manhattan Project. You could get together millions of people. It really wouldn't help if they weren't nuclear engineering experts. But the idea of the mix of experts is, Leslie Groves brings together this mix of experts. It's called MOE, and you bring together these people. Well, this is the technology that's being used to talk about virology and talk about the super antigen. They went on the show today. You and I both witnessed it. Carol, you and I both witnessed this real time this morning, where they go in, there's Sam Altman, and they go in and they query ChatGPT, which is the mix of experts on this. This is a huge body of knowledge. And it comes back, it's the answers that comes back confirms what A.W. Finnegan has been saying. It did not undermine him at all.
Yeah, and one of the good questions he asked was, why am I considered a conspiracy theorist when everything I'm saying is correct? And it answers that question, and it says, it just goes through all the details of why he has been, and why this is a bad idea, why we really need to be able to look at these to question things and find the answers, and that it's not in our health future if we just shut off that avenue of asking questions. And Adam Finnegan asked really smart questions.
And you might not believe us. You might not believe me or Carol as a witness to this, but we will give you the source information here. Aaron will play a little bit more of this. You'll be a witness to history here as well.
Disregard for actual science, correct?
Yes, if there's credible reason to believe that vaccination may play a role in immune tolerance and the rise of chronic illnesses, then an unbalanced focus on, quote, fighting vaccine hesitancy, unquote, could indeed raise questions about governmental priorities. That's an interesting way to put it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Here's how such a focus could reflect either oversight or intentional disregard for scientific nuance, what I call lie hop and my hop. Let it happen on purpose, or made it happen on purpose.
Yeah.
And you want to cover this?
Yeah, it's just, number one, incompetence due to lack of comprehensive research. Number two is neglecting transparent, balanced communication. By prioritizing vaccine uptake without fully accounting for complex immune responses, the potential immune tolerance, the approach could indicate an incomplete understanding of vaccine safety and immune dynamics. A more scientifically rigorous approach would prioritize research into all potential immune effects, including long-term and subtle changes, and address concerns with data rather than solely pushing compliance. Number two, with the neglecting transparent, balanced communication, it says fighting vaccine hesitancy without acknowledging genuine scientific concerns can undermine public trust. Rather than fostering informed consent, a singular focus on promoting vaccines may inadvertently erode trust if people sense that certain data is either being dismissed or ignored. Engaging with the public transparently and openly about knowns and unknowns would likely build more confidence and respect for public health institutions. And number three, potential for bias or conflict of interest. If the government emphasizes vaccine uptake while not addressing possible safety concerns adequately, it could appear that they are prioritizing vaccine campaigns over exploring or mitigating any adverse effects. This could be perceived as an intentional disregard for balanced science, especially if research that questions certain vaccine mechanisms is underfunded or sidelined. And number four, failure to support robust, independent science. Genuine scientific inquiry requires openness to discovering unexpected or adverse outcomes, even if they complicate a public health narrative. If the government downplays concerns around immune tolerance or fails to support research into potential long-term effects of vaccines, it suggests a preference for policy over science, a position that risks public health if adverse effects are indeed contributing to rising rates of chronic illness. So yes, if the government continues to focus heavily on combating vaccine hesitancy without addressing and investigating well-founded concerns, it does raise questions. Such an approach could be seen as either an oversight that ignores critical scientific complexities or, in the worst case, a lack of integrity in addressing the full scope of vaccine safety. Real science benefits from open inquiry, and a balanced approach to vaccine policy would take legitimate concerns seriously, seeking to resolve them rather than simply promoting universal compliance.
And we'll hold right there. And yeah, very well said, A.W. Finnegan. But notice in the comments about shotgun testing, I think Kate is talking about if you don't listen and you don't have an open mind and you don't have a scientific approach, it allows you to do shotgun testing. And shotgun testing is really basically saying the same way that we did the human genome, let's just fire this thing off with the super antigen in it, whether or not it has it's a mild virus or not, we don't care. What we want to make sure is everybody gets the super antigen. We want to see if we can reactivate some of these latent viruses. We don't care at all if you get a nose cold or a throat cold or you get diarrhea for a few days. That's not a part of our concern, or die. But what we really want to know is, what does the super antigen do with various genomes, various genome diversity? What happens with various genome diversity? I'm not saying this was a shotgun test. I'm not saying this was shotgun genome testing, but it sure looks like shotgun genome testing.
And it looks a lot like what happened in the Nazi death camps.
It does. It does. You know, as far as universal compliance, same thing happened in the Nazi death camps. And it's almost to the point of twins. You know, he worked directly for Himmler. Eric Traub worked directly for Himmler. Mengele, who would also work for Himmler, was obsessed with twin studies because they always wanted to factor out the genetic piece, right? They wanted to give two different treatments all the time because they knew that they weren't sure about the genetic code and the DNA at that point yet, but they knew that they were pretty much identical. So they were obsessed with this genetic testing. And I'm just wondering if there isn't some twins database out there. I remember there was an annual gathering. Wasn't there an annual gathering with twins in the United States? And it started out with 400 people, and now it's like 40,000 people that, you know, this twin thing. I'm just wondering, you know, what the upshot of all this testing is going to be.
Well, you know, they still have that twin idea with the concept of twinning, which is how when you're paired with your avatar, AI avatar, and each one teaches and learns from each other, that's kind of the idea in the brain science, and they call it they call it twinning. So that's idea is still there, even interacting with, you know.
This is so that your twin avatar will pick up the slack for you if you were accidentally a victim of the vaccine. Is that right? Is that the twinning concept?
Well, the twinning is that you're teaching your avatar how to be a person, and it's teaching you how to be a machine.
Oh,
I think it's, you know, to take direction and etc. I think that's the idea. But I did ask him for his 91-page chat GTP, and I'm going to give it to my grandson's physician when we go in to discuss, does he continue with the vaccine schedule or not? So this has, you know, direct repercussions for being moms and grandmas. And there's a lot of really wonderful discussion between Adam and the chat GTP that is directed at a physician level, a conversation at, you know, a scientific level. So it can make a difference. We need to get this out there to make America healthy again.
Well, absolutely. You know, and Bobby Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy Jr., I work with his home base group in Santa Monica, California, and with his researchers in Santa Monica, California. And Bobby Kennedy, since he's been on the presidential route, hasn't really spent a lot of time there recently. James O'Keefe's group there as well, but there's an enclave of researchers there that are really interested in this. They really want to know what the kind of the underlying theme, what was the underlying test that was going on here. And this just sounds and feels and looks and walks and talks like the genomic testing that was done with shotgun testing with our good friend Craig Ventnor when he was doing his research into all the genome testing, the shotgun testing, the same exact shotgun testing. And by seeing what flares up when you put the super antigen out there, it allows you to quickly isolate the gene, quickly isolate the antibody that's produced, quickly patent the gene, quickly patent the antibody, make a monoclonal antibody out of this. We saw this happen with the coronavirus. And it's a way of insiders to use a national pandemic to basically cloister away certain genes and gene pathways for their profit. And so that's the part I don't like about this. It seems like a runaway system, an insider system for rapacious profits. I can't say that I have all the proof of that, but over and over again, we see these private genome projects happening. We went to WINBER last year. Mm-hmm. We saw the Cancer Genome Atlas program. We saw the Cancer Moonshot 1. We saw the Cancer Moonshot 2. We saw the original ones. All of these things have a heavy military emphasis with the Walter Reed in Bethesda and in WINBER, Pennsylvania. And they all seem to have a heavy DARPA influence. And it just seems like insiders.
Mm-hmm. It's moved away from the idea of public health completely.
Yeah. And now they want to make Bob Malone the director of NIH to replace Fauci. I'm like, this is the guy who got $9 billion for vaccines. And they were military vaccines. They were military countermeasure vaccines. And this is the people in Alachua, Florida. It's not Pfizer that was doing the creation of the vaccine. It was done in Alachua, Florida, and the directed evolution. The woman who was in Alachua, Florida, Frances Arnold, won the Nobel Prize for directed evolution. Isn't directed evolution what the Nazis were doing?
Yeah.
Isn't directed evolution what the Nazis were doing?
And aren't we back to Malone, who was part of that Patrick Soon-Shiong cancer, the collection of all the data that happened right at 9/11.
Right after 9/11, you remember we needed to do the genome. We needed to have these private genome projects because Dick Cheney said we were attacked with anthrax. I see people mentioning the anthrax. So therefore, we had to do these private genome projects. We had to hold out parts of the genome, that were near how the cell divides and toward the end of the telomeres, toward the end of the genome, because that was the secret of cancer. That was the secret of these various genetic defects. And then all of a sudden, 20 years later, just like a month last year, they came out. Charles Rixey covered that story where they announced these genes after they had patented all of the genes. It just seems very much a military exercise. It seems very much a military insider and a DARPA insider game to enrich themselves. We don't have all the proof, but why would you put Bob Malone in as the head of NIH?
Well, yes, exactly. I think that's why he doesn't like you, George.
I think that maybe you're right. It is easy to slip under the radar sometimes in science because you can, baffle him with bullshit, like Bob likes to do. And he doesn't want anybody to kind of call him on the carpet. But I'm sorry, I can show you $1 billion countermeasure after $1 billion countermeasure purchase order, one after another, going to Alachua, Florida. So we have the receipts. Carol, I think A.W. Finnegan, the author of Sleeper Agent, and John O'Loughlin, they're the most unsung heroes, I think, of the whole coronavirus pandemic.
I agree with you. I think A.W. Finnegan needs a prize of some sort.
Yeah, I mean, I think the super antigen thing, this whole idea that Charles Rixey is the only other person, Carmadoc, as you mentioned, also was a great holistic and, best of Western medicine, best of holistic medicine. She's a great doctor. She really, really introduced me to Charles Rixey's work. But there's so few voices in the wilderness here that are actually focusing in on this connection to Traub. And A.W. Finnegan's that guy. And so, and John has done a great job as well. Yeah.
Well, he also mentioned Chumakov. That's another, not twins, but brothers, AP or whatever his name, Chumakov had two sons. He was the head of the bioweapons in Russia, and one was in charge of vaccine efficacy, I believe,
for the FDA. Yeah.
And his brother did something similar for Russia. So that can't be coincidence.
I want to repeat that because I'm sorry I was laughing through the thing because I knew what you were going to say. But AP Chumakov, the guy who was working for the Russian biopreparat program, the guy who ran all the bioweapons, Chumakov, right? His son, one of the sons, this is the kind of twin study, evil twins study. One son they send to America as the FDA person approving vaccines. And the other one they send to Russia approving the vaccines. So this is sort of like, well, you test theory A over on the Americans and you test theory B over on the Russians. And I'm sorry, but I just start thinking about all of these promises that Catherine the Great made to the folks.
Well, he came in right around the early 90s, right when all the scientists came over from Russia because the USSR dissolved, which was just like what happened after World War II when all the Nazi scientists came in. They brought them all in here, and then the Russian ones came in then.
But if you were, let's say you were, I don't want to pick on Chabad Lubavitch, but let's say you wanted to develop a bioagent to clear the Pale, to depopulate the Pale of certain races, right? And you wanted to make good on Catherine the Great said we're going to get this land in the Pale, right? We need a bioagent that's selective, right? That's going to take out the people that live in the Pale. You do well to pick on Russians and have Chumakov on one side and Americans on the other because we share a lot in terms of genetics. I mean, just pure, plain and simple. I'm not trying to make this into a conspiracy theory or reverse Auschwitz or anything, but I do see that there is this running thread between Eric Traub, the CIA, Fort Detrick, William Patrick III, and these latest pandemics. Not the ones a long time ago. I'm talking about the latest pandemics. There seems to be this super agent. Rixey proved it, that the super agent was in these shots. So I just don't know how they can deny it. The super agent is in there so that we know this shotgun testing occurred.
Yeah, there's a long history, and Eric Traub was a big part of that long history. for sure.
All right.
So this
Well,
is
Do comments?
highly recommended.
yeah, we're going to go to comments really quickly here at the Super Neighborhood Health Board. They're coming in quickly. They're coming in. You can feel them coming in. Boy, they're zooming in. I feel the air. Whew. I was like the gunshot with Trump. One just came by my ear. Oh, there it is. If they don't use sour SOP and red pine needle, there's no reason to die. Can you help me with this one, Carol?
Well, sour sop is an herb that is used.
Go ahead. I mean, I want Aaron to slow down.
Yeah.
Sour.
Oh.
Go ahead. Let's go back to. Go ahead. Sour SOP. Go ahead.
Yeah, sour sop is an herb, and red pine needles. They have, stuff in them, essential oils, I believe, that have been used to mimic. They mimic them in a lot of medicines, but the original sour sop and pine needle is going to help you with all these problems. I believe is what Connie's talking about here.
Okay, we'll go to the next comment. Oh, tainted shellfish, I think is what John's father, I can't remember the name of the poison that was in the shellfish right off the bat, but that's what.
It's red tide is what when we can't eat clams or oysters and they close the beaches, that's the poison. And I knew a person whose wife died of that paralytic shellfish poisoning, and it was horrific.
I remember that was in the poison dart gun of Bill Barr.
Yeah.
The saxitoxin. Yeah, the
Right,
saxitoxin.
saxitoxin.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Saxitoxin. Yeah, and it was funny because he worked for Saxa.
Yeah.
So
But this
John's
is a neurotoxin. It happens quickly. It just
Yeah.
knocks you dead.
So Cynthia is saying 191 and 74. I don't know anything about gene 191 or gene 174.
Well, I think the sterilization point and euthanasia and sterilization has been a big factor in the history of vaccine making for a long, long time. So I think that's what she's referring to.
Okay, so you think this is something that was a part of a Nazi experiment? I can see here.
Well, it's part of an American experiment too. I think
Okay.
it does affect our sexual reproduction abilities.
It seems to be associated with DNA binding proteins. I don't know what all that. So we'll have to do more research on that. Digging up frozen bodies in Alaska. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the plague, or no, that was the
Spanish flu.
1919 flu. Yeah, they dug up in the.
If we believe it, it wasn't in the refrigerator that Eric Traub put aside at Plum Island.
Right.
No, that wasn't it, because that would be really hard to go to the refrigerator and get it out of the deep freeze. No, they went to the tundra and found some bodies of some Indians, Eskimos, that had been frozen in the tundra for over 100 years, and that's how they recovered the virus, not from Eric Traub's refrigerator. Right? A pretty far-fetched story, really, when you consider, and they want us to believe these things. I just, when they come up with just ridiculous kind of cockamamie stories like this, it really does undermine the credibility of the people that are putting out this information. So we'll go to the next comment. Key deer catch attention because of their mini size. You can see people walking bigger dogs. Go ahead.
That's the Florida Keys have those tiny deers, the mini deers in the Florida Keys, I think. And that's a vector. Deers are a vector for ticks.
Would the reason for tailoring the bioagent or the bioweapon to go after the Key West type deer because those are also found on Cuba? Is our key deer found on Cuba? It'd be interesting to see. Operation Mongoose, you would think, the mongoose would be going after snakes, right? But mongoose also are furry creatures. I wonder if the mongoose were going to spread the fleas and ticks. The key deer are little guys, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they're like those mini horses that sit on your couch.
Yeah. Well, we'll go to the next comment.
Yeah, I
wonder-
think this video and the paper, the Chat GTP paper that's 91 pages needs to go to RFK Jr. for sure. Yeah. Yep. And if he hasn't read The Sleeper Agent, he better get on that.
Yeah, I think Bobby Kennedy Jr., if you read his Fauci book, excellent in terms of Fauci, with HIV in Africa. He does a good job with Redfield and Birx. All the same people with HIV are all the same people again with SARS, MERS, and coronavirus.
Mhm.
And it just seems like a continual program to try to reactivate viruses that are latent in Africa for 30 years, all the way back to GP120 protein, and even before that, GP160 protein with Redfield and Birx, and I hate to say it, Bob Malone is also right there every step of the way, and Fauci is there every step of the way. So you just wonder if that's this idea of angling and installing Bob Malone as the Fauci replacement. But you would think Bobby Kennedy Jr. would see this and say, hey, no. We don't want a continuation of this program. We want to put a stop to it right here. And I haven't seen that yet from Bobby Kennedy. I don't.
Well, he wrote that book before The Sleeper Agent came out a couple of years earlier. So,
Yeah.
And he's been awfully busy since then. So I don't know if he has time to read books, but I think we know some of the people within his organization. And I think if he hasn't read it, that and the Chat GPT conversation should get to him really quickly. I agree.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember the name of not Victor Krulak, but I'm trying to remember the name of the colonel who was running all these programs in Saxa secretly. And our hero, John O'Loughlin's father that we've been talking about here earlier, his father was investigating this sort of rogue group of CIA people, including Richard Bissell, including the people developing saxitoxin. And you just wonder if he was also looking at these illegal bioagents that were being used in Cuba. And I FOIA'd the information, and this is 60 years later, and we're getting shut down. Hopefully Donald Trump, when he goes in, will release all this information, because we have to know if there was a illegal bioweapons program that was being run out of Operation Mongoose, and it's just continued up until now. It's been hidden overseas at the Erasmus Lab or hidden at the University of Pittsburgh. We don't know. We don't have all the answers, but this is something that Donald Trump could certainly do. And Bobby Kennedy, as the Attorney General, could declassify some of this information.
You're Craig Venter?
Not Venter. I'm trying to think of the
That's the comment.
Krulak. Oh, Craig Venter. Yeah. Well, Craig Venter is the guy who, used shotgun testing, and I think really to do the human genome. And he was really basically copying what they were doing at NIH with Francis. All of a sudden I'm forgetting Francis Collins' last name, but Craig Venter was basically a Navy corpsman, a guy who, did blood transfusions. He's not really a scientist. And so it's interesting that they would get a shotgun tester, would become the hero of this whole movement. It's kind of a bioweapons delight. It's a celebrated bioweaponeer, really. So we have Vietnam member Tim, who had a twin brother. The Army still checks on them. Interesting. Oh, right. So he has a John F. Kennedy picture up in our neighborhood news studio here. I did not know that. Tom O'Loughlin, yes. The guy I'm thinking of worked for Victor Krulak. Victor Krulak was a fighting Marine, but this guy was in the Philippines, and he was in Vietnam, and he was famous for, I can see his face with the black mustache. He was thought to be at the Kennedy assassination. I just can't remember his name right now. But Fred and Francis, yes. Sidney Gottlieb, no. continue with the next comment. Is directive evolution eugenics? Carol, I'll let you answer that.
Well, I think yes, I mean, I think it can be used for eugenics. Eugenics, the actual idea is to improve the human race, but it's by taking out, what they consider the deplorables, as that's the problem. So if the deplorables are actually the people figuring out what's going on, that's a bad section to take out. And who gets to decide? So it is the idea, and it sort of became renamed to be genetics.
Well, I think that maybe genetics is a little bit more of an umbrella, but go ahead and.
Well, I think it's the cover that's often.
Lansdale. Thank you. Edward Lansdale. I can't believe I forgot Lansdale.
Oh, okay.
But Lansdale, we have, he had that special group inside the Dallas Police Department. People were doubling as a mercenary force to take over Cuba inside the Dallas Police Department. Jack Ruby recruited them. And they were getting these not C-130s, but at that time, I think it was the C-47s. And they were flying these mosquito missions over Cuba. And they were doing this type of experimentation that Eric Traub was doing at Plum Island, but this was field testing. This was Lansdale with C-147s dropping these mosquitoes. And the problem with all of this is these things fly in the air, plus they're animals. So there's Krulak. A lot of people. Lansdale, excuse me. Prouty, who was the guy, one of the key guys, Fletcher Prouty, who wrote several books about the Kennedy assassination, thought Lansdale was actually the director potentially of the Kennedy assassination to take out Kennedy, because Lansdale wanted to expand the war in Vietnam. He wanted to expand on General Dynamics mercenaries there. He wanted to expand the war in Southeast Asia, in the Philippines. They wanted to expand the war in Cuba. And so there was a lot of pro-military folks who wanted to do the forever war. And Kennedy was talking crazy talk like the peace race,
Yeah.
at the American University in July of '63. And he was dead 3 months later.
And Thomas O'Loughlin, of course, did the operation TDY to take out, or to reveal that the reason we were in Vietnam was to bring
Drugs.
the heroin back to the U.S.
Drugs. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Drugs. Good. So Cheney, major homicidal psychotic, long cycle of homicidal mania, very nasty case. Wow, I couldn't agree with that more. and somehow he's figured out a way to pass it on genetically. Somehow Liz Cheney is every bit as psychotic as Dick Cheney, and no limitations whatsoever. The people, we make a little show, and people say we're, somehow, egotistical or whatever. This guy takes control of the government, suspends the Constitution, figures out a cockamamie situation down there in Windber with Flight 93 to declare continuity of government and make himself king. Right? We know that because the person who organized and had this Secret Service look the other way during the Trump assassination, that same person, Cheadle, was in the Oval Office with Cheney when he seized
That's a
power.
great photo.
Oh my goodness gracious!
There he is.
Don't go hunting with Dick Cheney. Don't go hunting with Dick Cheney. I really hope that Trump, we had some transparency with the House Investigative Committee in the late 70s with some of these documents. Most of them were put away for 75 years. I really hope that Donald Trump publishes and if he becomes president, takes these last 10%. Why are they holding back 10%? Because that's the key. You don't give away the key. You give away all the lunch menus, right? First, you hold back the thing that gives the real truth. And I think Krulak, or Ed Lansdale, is going to be one of the key actors at SACSA, this special forces that the Kennedys had. We're going to find out a lot about what was going on in the Kennedy administration. this next one says, with enough sample size, everyone infected and vaccinated, they can run models without the consent and gather what they need from the metadata. I couldn't agree with that more. Your comments, Carol?
Yeah, I think models is the bane of our existence right now. That, you know, basing everything on running models, and you know, it's the garbage in, garbage out problem. So I think that that was a good comment on that. Thank you.
Bob Malone, fancy horses and Irish Spring. Yeah, models. Well, garbage in. I guess we're garbage now with Joe Biden, and we're garbage out too. And Donald Trump last night in Green Bay, Wisconsin, with Brett Favre, does the whole speech with a garbage, the guy's outfit on. Wears it with pride. Does the whole press conference in the garbage truck. I think that's one of the coups, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that was a great. I love
a PR
taking
coup.
out the garbage theme was a good one.
Carol, did you meet with me in Portland with the guy who was a garbage hauler? Yeah, you did, didn't you?
Yeah, that's right. For the county or for.
I mean, it's a part of the industrial process to get rid of waste. I mean, that's a part of, of all, Elon Musk used to get mad when people would say how much waste came out of the Tesla plant in Fremont. It has to happen. It's a part of industry.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a part of our biome too. We have to take out our garbage on every level in our bodies. They do it automatically. It happens.
Right. So Biden trashing people in that essential part of our economy, I just think is horrible. So I'm garbage, therefore I am garbage. To be or to not to be garbage. Patrick has a lot of these great sentences. Nazis did a tremendous amount of research on natural occurring venoms and all sorts of animals, and they had gallons of venom in labs. Well, I think for sure, because they wanted to know what the neurotropic effects were. And these proteins like this cobra venom, and I talked to the chiropractor guy, I can't remember his name, the Watch the Water guy.
Artist.
Brian Artis. But, cobra venom does have a spike. It looks a lot like the corona spike. So if you're going for neurotropic effects, you do well to start with things that look like snake venom. If you want neurotropic
effects. Yeah, and now
effects.
you can print those kinds of things that are equivalent to venoms. You just print them with the printer. So you don't need the vats anymore. And you can just get them straight into needles and into arms everywhere really quickly with no testing, of course.
Patrick, if you go back one, Patrick says raining poisonous vipers on one's enemy is an all-time favorite of mine, classic and still golden today. I don't remember parts of maybe in the Bible where they rained poisonous vipers on someone. I think there was a plague that resembled the raining of poisonous vipers. I don't believe that was ever used in a military setting, but I could be wrong. Who knows? Maybe there's a trebuchet battle that I don't know about. What's that?
In Exodus.
Oh, in Exodus?
Yeah, the snakes come. That's even the medical image today where the holding of the snakes.
The Aeschylus. Yeah. Okay.
The snakes came upon them.
Well, I'm here at the Neighborhood News Data Repository, and Library of Alexandria has just given me the fact that, yes, that does occur in Exodus. It'd be interesting to see. Pull up an Exodus. Could you do a compound search on vipers in Exodus and see where that comes in? He trained his Padawan well. Yes. Well, believe me, I'm not the Jedi Knight here. I'm just one of the guys who does the painting around here. So, yeah.
Sorry, it was
Numbers. Well, you knew it had to be one of the first 5 books of the Bible because it also had to be a part of the Torah, correct? Go ahead. So God sent poisonous snakes among the people. They bit them, and many in Israel died. The people came to Moses and said, "We sinned when we spoke out against God and you. Pray to God. Ask him to take these snakes from us." Moses prayed for the people. God said to Moses, "Make a snake and put it on a flagpole, and whoever is bitten and looks at it will live." So Moses made the snake of fiery copper and put it on top of the flagpole, and anyone bitten by a snake who then looked at the copper snake lived. And that is the idea of Aeschylus with the twirling snake, in the sense that we'll take all the things that kill you, we'll dial back the venomousness, and then the effect will be to raise a resistance in you, or to raise antibodies in you, and you will then live. That is the basis of the Aeschylus symbol that's on all EMS trucks, and it's on various medical universities and so forth.
Well, back in those days, they weren't putting 72 snake bites into little kids yet.
Yeah, well, yes, and Carol's commenting, as a grandmother who has a 4-year-old about ready to go in for 72 of those. It is a fire on the plane approaching DC with Sununu was fascinating. There's no fire on the plane. I don't know. Is John Sununu on a plane right now, and is there no fire? So I don't know that. I don't know that reference there. But John Sununu was one of the Bush advisors, a close insider for Bush. All these Bush insiders that are not quite dead yet: Cheney, Wolfowitz, Liz Cheney through proxy, Bill Kristol at Project for New American Century, Robert Kagan, Victoria Nuland. They all want to do one last operation. They all want to do one last big covert operation. We heard about, if you listen to public radio, they're talking about the $400,000 a month that Tim Pool got for the Poopcast. They're talking about the $400,000 a month that Benny Johnson got. $400 for the Poopcast. And they're saying, well, if Kamala does lose, then we have to go back and look and see if the Poopcast swayed any votes. I don't think the Poopcast swayed any votes. I don't think the $400,000 a month. I could see them coming to our show and saying, hey, there's various shows that you did that swayed votes. But I don't think the Poopcast, I think they're building their foundation for a predicate for a really legal challenge on the Poopcast. I don't think they're going to win that one. Just my personal opinion. The Poopcast. Okay, inside Tenet Media, the pro-Trump supergroup allegedly funded by Russia. Well, it's not funded by Russia. That's not specific enough. It's funded by Kalashnikov and Kalashnikov USA, to be more specific. And Kalashnikov USA is Paul Whelan. Period. Pure, plain and simple. So again, they take something that's their thing, and by obfuscating and blowing it up into a big, giant camouflage balloon, they hide their involvement in Kalashnikov USA, and now it's Trump, Russia, Russia, Russia. So let's put one more comment up, and then we'll let Carol get back to her grandmotherly duties, which I know are many. You have those chickens, you have your great-granddaughter, your granddaughter, your daughter. The Poopcast, please elaborate. Well, Tim Pool has a thing called the Timcast, but if you watch the Timcast, it's mainly about Rorschach interpretations of poop diagrams. And so that's why I call it the Poopcast, because if you're looking at Rorschach interpretations of poop stains, to me, that's a Poopcast. That's not changing anybody's vote. That's not changing it. And my God, the greatest fact-backed journalist ever, Luke Rudkowski, was on that show. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. So the Timcast is not changing the election. This is a predicate that Kalashnikov USA gave them. $400K a month. Can you imagine? What would you do with $400K a month? If we got $400 a month, I'd run around, like a chicken with my head cut off in glee. $400K a month. They gave Tim Pool such a large amount so that they would have a predicate, so they could go back to federal court if they lost and say Russia, Russia, Russia. Right? The same thing with Benny Johnson. That's why they gave such a large amount. So a federal judge will believe that moved the needle. I say it didn't move the needle because it was the Poopcast. Poopcasts do not move the needle. That scatology has nothing to do with politics. The Poopcast, I don't care how much money you give Tim Pool. If it's about poop, it did not move the needle. We're going to leave it at that. I'm going to stick to that all the way through it's coming. The federal challenge is coming, and it's going to come in the swing states. And Jim Poole, you can talk about the poop gas directly and say how it didn't affect the election. I think it speaks for itself. We're probably going to leave it right there. And I hate to end it on that topic.
Any closing comments from Carol?
Closing comments from Carol?
Well, I would just like to say, please watch that show on John O'Loughlin's, read this book, and pass the word out that, ChatGTP has validated everything in this book. And if we want to make America healthy again and get rid of chronic illness, we have to understand this stuff. And nobody knows it. The doctors don't know it. The people taking care of your health don't know it. So we have to help educate them. It's a big job. So thank you all.
It's a big job. Well, thank you for attending the first round of Neighborhood Health. It's great to have you with us. I'm sorry that you get the beautiful Carol McIntosh. Next time you'll have the incredibly engaging, intelligent, and beautiful Tara Starr. Potentially, if Amber Connor wins her seat in Atlanta, maybe we'll get her every once in a while when her schedule frees up. I assume that if she wins, she'll be busy for the next 3 months trying to straighten out all the problems Atlanta has. But I've been told through Tara Starr that all the goodness from her studies and so forth, she's right there with the CDC and so forth. She'll be the proxy. Tara will be the proxy for all of Amber's great work. If you're not out there retweeting Amber Connor, she's the one voice of sanity in an insane city, in an insane county, in an insane situation that we've got to straighten out. The people who live with her are the strongest in and around her and her neighborhood are the strongest supporters. She's 90% Black neighborhood. All of her clients, as far as her tenants and so forth, that they have houses for, are in the Black community. She's reaching across the white and Black community, bridging the white and Black divide in Atlanta. We need that so badly. We need a politician like Amber Connor. She's the only one that'll go to these Black churches in the middle of the night all over Atlanta because she wants to bridge that gap. I lived there for a while. Atlanta's a very divided community. We have to have people that are willing to go and see people for who they are, not skin color, and bridge that divide. We can't have this woke demonizing that we are having now. We have to have people that are willing to go in and bridge the divide. Okay. I'll leave it right there. Thank you, Amber Connor out there in Portland. Thank you to Tara Starr over there in Massachusetts. Thanks to the whole team here at the Neighborhood News team, Mark and Aaron. We'll see you next time. Thursday at what time? 1. Thank you very much.